Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things and welcome to another video. And today I thought I would tell you about 10 of my favourite classics, but 10 of my favourite classics that aren't from 19th century Britain. So back in September when I was doing my favourites week videos to celebrate reaching 10,000 subscribers, I put up a video which was on my top 10 favourite classic novels. But all of those novels were 19th century British novels, 8 of them were Victorian and the other 2 were by Jane Austen. This is because I love Victorian literature a lot and 19th century British literature as a whole is my favourite thing. I have read a lot more 19th century British literature than I have read classics from other time periods and other places. And also, a lot of my favourite books are books that I have studied. I think I'd studied quite a lot of that top 10, and because I studied English literature at university and because I went to school in the UK, a lot of the literature I studied at school and at university was British. We actually studied quite a lot of plays that weren't British. We didn't study many British plays at all, but nearly all of the novels we studied were British, interestingly. On the list of 10 I have to give you today, 5 of them are British 20th century novels, which won't surprise you too much. Some of them, I will admit, are from the Edwardian period and are as close to the Victorians as I can get in this video. The others are 19th and 20th century classics from other countries. It's still quite a limited list, but these are some classics that I really love. I just didn't love quite as much as the 10 that were in my list. To be honest, even if I made a video of my top 20 classics, I think like 17 or 18 out of the 20 would be 19th century British still, but I do really love these books, so I did want to mention them as well, and some of these are books I read before BookTube, so I haven't kind of talked about very much on this channel, so I thought it would be nice to talk about some of these today. At number 10 I have Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I really love this book. I read it a couple of years ago and just really enjoyed it. This is a 19th century Russian classic. There are sort of 2 threads, one of which follows a woman called Anna who is in an unhappy marriage and what happens when she meets a man that she thinks she likes more than her husband, and then we also follow Levin and Kitty, who are another couple who are kind of like, sort of like a will they won't they plotline, shall we say, which I really enjoyed. Kitty and Levin were my favourite characters in this book and I really loved their plotline. This is a fantastic book. Leo Tolstoy writes beautifully. I found it so moving and so powerful. I should say as well that I've also read War and Peace and I didn't like War and Peace nearly as much. Like, I did really enjoy War and Peace, but War and Peace was very much a 4-star and Anna Karenina was very much a 5. And when I read War and Peace, I did feel that it was too long, whereas Anna Karenina, though it is a big book, like, I didn't feel that at all, and I felt like everything that was there needed to be there, and I loved it a lot. It's a fantastic book. I would highly recommend it, and I would also say that I find it more accessible than War and Peace, so definitely one to read. At number 9 is Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak. Now, this is a novel I read a really long time ago. I think I was about 17 or 18 when I read it, so back when I was in school. This is a Russian classic published in 1957, so I think it's the most modern classic I have on this list. And this is a kind of fantastic novel set between very early 20th century Russia up until the Second World War, following the life of one man and his family over the course of the Russian Revolution and the 2 World Wars. It is absolutely brilliant, incredibly powerful and so wonderful. I also feel like it's one of those books I read at the right time because I studied Russian history, specifically late 19th century and early 20th century Russian history when I was at school, and really loved it. And reading Dr. Zhivago and like reading about the way that he writes about history and that was just brilliant. I also would say, like, I've mentioned before, I think, on this channel that in general books that have like affairs in or a character torn between 2 love interests but kind of committing to both at the same time quite often frustrate me. But I feel like Dr. Zhivago is the only book I have ever read where I have believed that a character loves 2 people and is actually in love with 2 people. It's the only book I've ever read where I believed that, and I think like it's written so fantastically and it's just such a good story. I really do recommend it. It's such a great book. At number 8 I have Kipps by H.G. Wells. This novel is from 1905, so very close to the Victorian period, but just outside of it. And this is a fantastic novel. I love H.G. Wells. I've spoken about him a lot in the context of like being a Victorian author, but obviously like quite a few of his books were published after the Victorian period, and therefore I feel like I don't talk about Kipps when I would like to. Kipps is a brilliant book. It follows a young man from a very working class background who suddenly comes into some money and what that does to his life. I think of Kipps as Great Expectations but more realistic. Like, what would actually happen if someone from the background of Pip and Great Expectations suddenly had a lot of money, and Kipps is suddenly thrown into this whole new world of upper class society. He just doesn't know how to behave in that society. He doesn't know the rules, but also he doesn't like it very much because it doesn't seem as real as the world he has come from. It is a fantastic book, a real like interesting look at class and society in the kind of late 19th, early 20th century Britain, and yeah, I would highly recommend. At number 7, I have Vile Bodies by Evelyn Waugh. So I don't think I've spoken about Evelyn Waugh very much on BookTube because I haven't read anything by him for a while, but I have a real love-hate relationship with Evelyn Waugh. I actually did a whole module on Evelyn Waugh at university, so I have read a lot of his books, I've studied a lot of his books, and when I say I have a love-hate relationship with Evelyn Waugh, I mean I love Vile Bodies and I love A Handful of Dust, and I kind of hate Brideshead Revisited most and some of the time, and I found Scoop really boring, and I don't know what I think of Decline and Fall, and The Loved One was just really weird. I think those are all the Evelyn Waugh books that I've read, but I feel like I've probably missed one or two out. Evelyn Waugh has some sort of very different writing styles, I think, in different books of his, and often I find his earlier work, like Vile Bodies, very sparse and jumpy in the way it's written, whereas something like Brideshead Revisited is really lyrical, and I find it a bit overwritten for me. But Vile Bodies, in the like sparsity of the language and the focus on dialogue, I just love. I think it's fantastic. So this was written and is set in the interwar period in Britain and follows a young man called Adam and his kind of very rocky relationship with the girl he intends to marry, and they are sort of on the outskirts of the bright young thing. There's this kind of glamorous world of society, and all these strange parties, and it kind of looks at the sort of pointlessness of the lives of many of these people. It's just a fantastic book and I would highly recommend it. At number 6 we have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. This is a fantastic novel. This is an American book. It's published in 1962, so actually this is a couple of years after Dr. Zhivago, and this is fantastic. This tells the story of two sisters who live in this castle with their uncle, and all of the rest of their family died years ago, and the elder sister was accused of murdering the rest of the family, but was eventually released and acquitted, and it follows how the lives of these two sisters have changed. We view the world through the perspective of the younger sister, and kind of see how everything comes together, and also their sort of odd position within their society. It is so dramatic and exciting, and like all the twists and turns of the plot are just so good. I love this book a lot. At number 5 is And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. This is my favourite Agatha Christie book. I love Agatha Christie a lot. I think she's a fantastic writer, but I do genuinely think of the like 10 or so books by her that I have read, And Then There Were None is just the best, hands down. It's just fantastic. It tells a story of a bunch of different characters who are all summoned to this island in the middle of nowhere for various slightly dubious reasons, and when they've been there a little while, they start to realise that they have all been invited there because they were involved in one way or another with the death of another person, whether through accident or negligence or outright murder. And then slowly but surely they start to get picked off by the person who has brought them to the island. It is amazing. It's such a dramatic, powerful book. I read it literally in a day and I just flew through it because it's so exciting and dramatic and spooky and so clever. And the way as well that Agatha Christie handles all of the characters, because there are a lot, is just amazing. I think she's such a fantastic writer, and yeah, definitely my favourite book by her. At number 4, I have Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is a British novel from 1938 and I love it a lot. I think it is amazing. We follow our narrator, who is unnamed, and what happens when she gets married fairly near the beginning of the book to a man called Maxim, who she doesn't really know. And when she gets to Maxim's house, she discovers that all of the marks and traces left by his first wife, Rebecca, still kind of linger about the house. Everyone in the area knew and loved Rebecca, his first wife, and she feels that she can never really live up to Rebecca. And the book kind of follows what goes on from there, with all of the twists and turns and all of that Daphne du Maurier exciting gothic wonderfulness. If you've read this book and you've read Jane Eyre, I made a video just after I read this, like talking about the connections between them and the echoes that Rebecca has towards Jane Eyre. So I'll link that down below as well. The way this book interacts with Jane Eyre made the reading experience even more exciting for me because I love Jane Eyre. And yeah, this is a fantastic book, would highly recommend. At number 3, I have Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. This is a 19th century French novel and one I absolutely love. It is actually the only book by Jules Verne I have read, and I really, really need to read more because I loved this so much. Me and Nick listened to it together on audiobook about a year ago and just both really, really loved it. It is so funny, but also so like heartwarming and wonderful. There's so many like powerful messages in it as well. So Around the World in 80 Days follows a man called Phineas Fogg who accepts a kind of bet that he can travel around the whole world in 80 days. And him and his valet travel around the world. Phineas is not really like interested in the world around him, though his valet Passepartout is, but they like encounter various things along the way, and we just follow their adventures. It's really, really funny and really, really clever and interesting in terms of looking at the way the world was viewed in the 19th century, and kind of looking at technology and travel as well. Like, it's just such an interesting novel and one I would highly recommend. At number 2, I have Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, another 19th century French novel. I haven't read this for years. I read this when I was 14 or 15, I think, but it really, really has stayed with me. I think it is such a brilliant book. Les Miserables is a pretty long one. I don't have a copy here because I read my parents' copy because I read it when I was a teenager, but it's well over 1,000 pages. I think after War and Peace, Les Miserables might be the longest book I've ever read. And I think it is amazing. If you have seen the musical, you need to read the book as well, because there's like so much more story, so many more things that you don't hear about. Like, the musical is fantastic, and I think actually as an adaptation of the book, considering how long the book is, the musical does pretty good, does it justice very well. I love it a lot, but the book itself is just so amazing. The characterization and the writing, and the exploration of French society and of poverty and of grief, and also the humour, like, from the image of Les Miserables we have in popular culture and from the musical, you wouldn't think that actually this is a novel that's really funny. Like, the wit of Victor Hugo is fantastic. It really, really reminds me of Dickens, actually. It really, really, I feel like Victor Hugo is French Dickens, and that is one of the reasons why I need to read more by him. So Les Miserables follows various characters, kind of focusing on the conflict between a man called Jean Valjean and a man called Javert. Javert is a police officer. Jean Valjean is, at the beginning of the book, a criminal, by which I mean he stole some bread. Not a very serious criminal, but he has been in prison, and after his release he tries to like turn his life around. But one of the things I love about Les Miserables is just how many characters it follows, and how Victor Hugo, like, every time a character turns up, just gives you like 10 chapters on their backstory, because why not? But in a really wonderful, rich way where it feels like every detail is warranted. And it's so powerful and so emotional. Like, I feel like I just wept my way through Les Miserables, but also laughed a lot as well, because also there's a lot of humour. And it's just, yeah, it's just fantastic, and I highly, highly recommend it. But my favourite classic that's not from 19th century Britain is probably Maurice by Ian Forster. This is a British novel, and it was written in sort of 1913 to 14, and then not published until after Ian Forster's death in 1970. And it is a wonderful, wonderful book. I love Ian Forster a lot, and this is my favourite book by him. And it follows a young man called Maurice, who early on in his life realises that he is attracted to men, and it follows how he deals with this and how he deals with the way that this makes him in a way an outcast from Edwardian society, and it follows his relationship with men, and how being gay affects him at this time, the struggles he has with his own sense of identity and his own sense of morality, as well as the difficulty he has with having relationships with men in a society where it's not accepted. Ian Forster himself was gay, and we know that at least some of this is from experience, and that does make it more emotional as a novel. But leaving that aside, it is just a fantastically powerful love story, and also a brilliant book about identity and social position and class, and what it feels like to not feel like you are part of the society in which you live in. It is fantastic and so moving, and just, I like sobbed for a full 15 minutes after I finished this because I was so moved. I think it is beautiful and wonderful, and I can't urge you to read it enough. Yeah, this book is truly amazing, and I highly, highly recommend it. One of my favourite books that I've read in the last few years. So emotional, so powerful, and just, yeah, I love it a lot. And there we have it. Those are my 10 favourite classics that aren't from 19th century Britain. I hope this was an interesting video and gave you an insight into some of the other classics I like that are further away from my typical classic reads. And I think that's all. Let me know down in the comments if you have any other recommendations for me. I'm especially looking for recommendations of non-British classics in general. I feel like I have a fairly good idea in my head of which, like, French, Russian, American and Japanese classic authors I would like to read in the future, but if you have any recommendations for classic authors from other countries, that would be really helpful, and do leave them down in the comments below. And I think that's all. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.